last few weeks. So my concept of time and when something happened is really sort of just blurring from one day to the next. Nonetheless, we did some big load tests last week. I think I mentioned office hours getting 500 avatars in a scene at once. The good news is that we can now do this. We have done a load test with 150 users last week, which was just to validate all of our assumptions with the sort of users. We had 150 real users from a testing company. They logged in on Thursday night. We got 156 avatars in the scene with acceptable performance, and the really cool thing is that it's validated that my avatar's test harness, which is sort of a simulator, kind of like a bot, does in fact represent the true load of a real avatar. So we are rapidly working towards putting 500. We're going to get 500 real testers in about 2 to 3 weeks' time. And we're hoping to sort of roll that feature out with the 2B line as well. So we're really beginning to scale that up. Now, I have mentioned previously this is for a music event we're doing that really desperately wants to put hundreds of avatars into one scene at once, and we're happy to accommodate on that one. So next week's announcement, if we're talking about Linux and Apple, hang on for next week, that there's something cool happening. So I guess the community team can manage invites to that particular event. Now, Carsten, have I got you on this line?
Yep, I'm here, and Artemis is here with me as well.
Fantastic. So look, what I'd like to do is I'd probably spend another minute or two just digging through a few of the things that we've been working on, because I do actually know that there has been some exciting work going on in our developer code base. So I'm just going to quickly bring up my notes. I apologize, I'm a little bit underprepared today because I was a last-minute substitution for our special guest. But let me just dig through a few of the things that people have been asking for, that we have actually had a little bit of time over the last week to really dig through. I know people have been complaining about the name tags since I changed them last time, so I have some good news that name tags have been changed a little bit back towards how they were before, and a little bit towards how they could be. So there's actually some extra space in name tags too. So we're adding some freeform text fields and things that we can throw things like group names and things on top of whatever else you're getting there. And they're a bit cleaner, and they look better when there's a huge crowd of avatars. That's something also we had to realize when we did the 150 test. I have some screenshots, and it would be great if I could share them in World, but unfortunately I think that I need everyone on a 2B viewer for me to do that. So nonetheless, that's been one of the things that we've changed. I had a bug request about landmarks and changing the names. That's been done. I am putting a button in for the, I'm going to do it today actually, for the create a bookmark anywhere. I did see that on the issue tracker. Let's see, what else do we have here? There's some fixes. Something I mentioned at office hours 2 weeks ago is that we've been really rapidly hiring up the engineering team. The first big contingent of new staff has been on the testers department. Previously, we've sort of been stuck with Chloe and Tracy doing the bulk of our testing work for the last few months, and it's been a little bit unfair because they are managing a lot of bugs and not getting quite enough time to actually go search out the new ones. So we now have 6 testers in the office, and that number is growing. We've also got some new developers. So if you look on the issue tracker, you'll find there's a whole bunch of new reporters and developers being assigned issues. We're beginning to get everyone up to speed. Obviously, there's a little bit of a training period before we really sort of have everyone fully productive, but it's been nice to see, and that number is going to continue to rise over the next couple of weeks and months, that as we pull up towards my full engineering department, which has currently 21 members, but at this rate, who knows how big it'll get in the next few weeks. So there's some cool stuff there. Coming down the line, what else do we have? We have lots of fixes. Right. So there's a couple of things that we've been working on. This one is a bit of a secret project of mine and one other developer. I haven't had a lot of free time over the last couple of weeks, but over the last 6 months, I've been working with another one of our engineers in our free time to implement a new scripting sandbox. And that doesn't sound terribly exciting until I mentioned that it is full process isolation. And again, doesn't sound very exciting. We've actually implemented the Chrome security sandbox into our scripting engine, and that means that we can run more dangerous languages and more dangerous VMs. The Chrome JavaScript engine compiles the JavaScript that we have to a machine code interpretation of it. It does that in order to get acceptable speed when you're running big JavaScript scripts. But in order to run machine code inside the browser, that's an incredibly dangerous thing. So Chrome has implemented something called the process isolation that basically prevents the code from doing anything that it shouldn't. That is to say, the operating system is told that this particular code is completely untrustworthy and not to listen to it. We've implemented the same thing with our scripting engine, and that means that we're able to run more dangerous scripting virtual machines. Currently, our scripting virtual machine involves a two-step process. We compile Lua to an intermediary bytecode. That happens at a variety of locations, but once it's been converted to that bytecode, we then have a JIT interpreter that converts that to SIL, which is the .NET bytecode, and then executes that. Now, the benefit of the two-step process is that to break out of that sandbox, you need to, one, break out of the SIL transpiler, which is basically a high-speed interpreter, and then you have to also break out of the .NET runtime using a very limited instruction set that doesn't include things like memory pointers and the rest of it. Going with that means that from a security perspective, it's quite secure and you don't need to worry about process isolation. However, let me lead up to what the big announcement is. So the big announcement is that because we are able to isolate processes, and this is a few months away from being deployed, so don't expect this one next week, we will have support for other programming languages in scripting. We're going to be using the same API, but it means that we are finally able to deliver C# in a way that I'm actually happy with. I've been resistant to allowing users to run C# scripts in Sciencebase for the very obvious reason that it's dangerous. It is a scripting language that provides just a little bit too much power to developers. And even if we do things like blacklist particular functions like the unsafe keywords and so on and so forth, the actual language itself can be abused in a variety of ways that just make it even an incompetent programmer could, for instance, at minimum crash your client by accessing things like threads and memory allocations and all the rest of it. The great thing about this process isolation is that it whacks that problem right in the head, because it means that the operating system will simply deny the script the ability to do those things. So we have got the test harness we're working on. We've got a bit more work to do. I've got to actually inject the scripting API into our sandbox, which is a quite complicated little bit of code, but over the next couple of weeks, that is something that we will be beginning to work on. Well, not beginning to work on. It's been actually officially now put as a formal project. So we will be releasing that probably in the 3D viewers. And there is some opportunities for more as well. Not only will we be able to offer things like C#, I'm also looking at offering WebAssembly as a scripting language, which would allow you to use any language you like, because there is a compiler to WebAssembly for almost every language on the planet. So those, I think, will be quite exciting for programmers in particular. It's probably not too exciting for other people, but the good thing is that it means that people who are interested in hiring scripters for various projects will be able to find that there's a vaster pool of programmers available to work on things. I have some other changes that are coming down the track. Camera updates. I know this has been often requested. We did say we would do it at the start of the year, and we've been completely railroaded off all of our plans for this year, which I do apologize for. We had some big plans for a public launch, and unfortunately that sort of fell a little bit by the wayside this year due to coronavirus sort of interrupting every single business plan that we had. But we're getting back on track for that one. So there is camera controls coming down the pipeline. They will be coming down, I would say, next viewer release, as long as there's a couple of days to go. I'm going to merge some changes in and finish making some UI work. I'm doing a bit of work on that one myself. So I guess probably about Monday's viewer should have that one in it. Let's see, what else do we have? We have some big improvements to Vivox that need to be released as well. As many of you know, my office hours a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, wherever this is on my calendar, it might have even been 3 weeks ago, my office hours got derailed by my voice quality, and that's partly because my internet connection is terrible, which is why I'm using Skype today. Gabby, after Monday, if Alan does another viewer tomorrow for a minor bug fix, it won't be in there. Monday, though, I will give you some cool stuff. Right, so back to Vivox. So Vivox has been a little bit of a thorn in my side at office hours a week ago, and that's because the version of the Vivox SDK, as we discovered after the fact, is in fact not production ready. No surprise. So we've been given a new version which supposedly is production ready. So we're going to be upgrading to that version of the SDK. That's a quick upgrade for us. But that will hopefully improve the general quality of Vivox. That will again require people to be on a new viewer, which means we need to get that 2B line out sooner than later. I put a standing call 2 weeks ago for any show-stopping bugs in the 2B viewer line. If you have a show-stopping bug in the 2B viewer line, it needs to be reported ASAP. If I do not receive any show-stopping bugs by the middle of next week, we will seriously evaluate getting 2B out the door, just because there is a lot of improvements off the 1B line. I mean, we've had 50-something 2B releases in the beta line, and I think we had 44 in the 1B release line, which means that the 2B viewer has had a lot of work sitting in it that really does need to get out the door. So let's see, what else have we got here? There's some improvements to name tag and voice chat. That stuff I've already talked about. The voice little meter has been adjusted for avatar sizes, so it will no longer end up inside your head. You can thank Eric for that today. Let's see, what else have we got here? And then I will turn to you, Carsten, in just a minute. Let me just see what else have we got here. We've got Secret Project, which was due to be announced today. I can't talk about that, but that will come down the line soon. So next week, keep an eye out for that invitation. Improvements to the way the gesture system works. Looks like we've fixed up a couple of compatibility bugs, so there's some previous stuff that should now behave itself. What else have we got? Oh, right. Okay, so there's a big change here that we've been working on. And this, I think I talked about this last week. Not last week. I'm just going to say last office hours. The general shader memory use. This was something I think my voice broke up while I was explaining. But when you reload a scene or an avatar or an item of clothing, we load up 3 things that are formatted in a Unity particular way. We've got all the textures. We actually do our own side loading there now because we've got a texture loader that's better than the one that Unity has. Among other things, it's multi-threaded, whereas Unity's is single-threaded. We have mesh loading. We do actually have our own mesh loader as well now. It's not used on every asset yet, but at some point it probably will be because its file size far more efficient than the Unity compressed mesh format. And the third thing that we load is materials. Now, materials are not textures. Materials are actually a combination of properties, which is sort of what textures are loaded where and what the values are. And it's a combination of the shader. Now, the shader itself has been massive. Unity pre-compiles every possible variant of a shader that you need. And it's been doing this since 5.4, and it's been driving me nuts. And the problem is that because we're a virtual world, you can load a object into any possible environment, which means that you've got to pre-compile for any possible environment. And that means that a content item, let's say a content item with, say, a 1 meg texture and 50 kilobyte mesh, suddenly has a 300 megabyte shader attached to it. Now, the shaders compress very, very well. That 300 megabyte shader will compress down to under a megabyte, which means that the network transmission, the actual downloading is pretty quick, and you guys don't notice that there's a 300 megabyte shader attached to it. However, when it's unpacked and we actually load it into memory, that 300 megabytes gets pushed into RAM. Now, on a modern operating system, say Mac OS, Linux, or Windows, the operating system will notice that we never use that memory, that we're only using a tiny little slither of it, and it'll push the rest of it onto a swap file on your hard disk. And that means that the overall real memory use is not very high because we're not frequently accessing that content. It's low priority and the operating system gets rid of it. The problem is that it does, one, result in the operating system writing 300 megs to your disk in order to push that off. Two, it means that operating systems which don't have swap files, iOS is the notorious one here, still have to load that 300 megabyte asset. And so on. Now, we've found some ways that we can cut the reductions quite dramatically. The easiest one that we've done, and this is in the 2B57 viewers, so please, again, do some compatibility checks, is fog. Unity has various fog modes. It's got 5 in total. And that means that Unity has 5 different ways of rendering fog, and it precompiles those into the shaders. Now, the problem here is that means it's multiplying all of our shaders by 5. So if we just removed the fog modes alone, we would get an 80% reduction in the overall file size of these and memory use of these shaders. This is something we've now done. We've actually removed fog support from shaders entirely, which is going to be happening. It'll most likely we'll be completing this over every new version. And instead, because obviously we do still want to support fog, we replaced fog with a post-effects based system, and that means that the renderer for Sciencebase actually injects fog after the top. And that means that we're trading an extra processing pass on the rendering for a 80% reduction in shader memory. Now, that doesn't sound like, well, it is a pretty good deal. But to give you an overview of just how bad it can be, one of my test scenes, I've got a couple of test scenes which have got 50 to 1,000 avatars in them. When we actually have a really diverse set of avatars, that means no one's sharing the same content, every avatar is completely customized and unique, we can actually see sort of gigabytes of memory being allocated to shaders. With these reductions, obviously that's an 80% reduction there. There's some big improvements to go. We've got 2 more ways that we're going to be reducing the shaders. The first is operating system variants. We do carry bundles of content that have got content for multiple operating systems in them. So when you download your clothing item, we've actually packed in the shader variants for Mac OS, the shader variants for Windows, the shader variants for Linux, and so forth. Those are actually all packed together, which means we've got another 60% saving we can do if we actually split those out and then run multiple processing, one for each operating system. It's a little bit messy, but it will mean that we can reduce the sizes again by another 60%. And there's finally another one for the renderers. We have support for 2 renderers in Sciencebase. We've got the deferred renderer, which is the one that most people are on. And then we've got the forward renderer. And the forward renderer is designed for higher speed. It's for the people who come in on low-end devices that can't support a full deferred rendering pass, particularly Intel graphics chipsets are the ones that usually get forward. So again, we can split those out as well, which means that our processing jobs, instead of doing one package that contains these groups all together, which was fine in previous versions of Unity, we're actually splitting those out into a couple more. That works a little bit down the road. You won't see those ones for a little while, but the fog ones alone, we have implemented. 2B57 has support for the new fog passes. Long story short, that's going to result in some big memory uses coming down. However, we do want bug reports if you have noticed anything weird going on with fog in the 2B57 viewers. I know that the skybox was being rendered with fog in 2B56. That was due to these changes, but that should be now fixed in the 2B57, 2B58, I think we're actually up to. I remember seeing that just before I disappeared today. So I'm just going to come down and just dig through a few more things that are happening because we actually have been very, very busy. I know it's sort of been looking a little bit transparent from the outside that we're not getting a lot done, but we've been doing quite a bit of work on back-end improvements. There's another one that probably hasn't been announced, but we have been moving storage providers. When you upload content, we have to store it somewhere. one of the biggest improvements you will notice is that the preview server is more reliably high-speed downloads. That means that when you preview content on the preview server, you have probably noticed that everything just loads quicker. That is because we've moved storage provider. We actually moved to a cloud provider, not Amazon. We moved to another one, and we did that because we ran out of disk space yet again. We've been using network attached storage for our storage for quite some time, but we eventually hit the point that we've been using just a little bit too much space, and it's not very efficient. And the final straw for us was that we were having trouble doing backups. Our backups were down to just one extra copy of every item. So we only had 2 copies for a short period of time. So we ended up doing a very rapid migration from one provider to another. We now have backup to our sort of 4 or 5 redundant copies of all content, which is good. All right, editor packs. Yes, that is an excellent question because there is quite a few things in here. There are some changes to the way that editor packs work too. I will have to pencil editor pack recompiling down because Joshua's normally in charge of that these days. I will give him a poke just asking about that because I know that it has been held up on a build issue. Let me just see if we can get a new one out the door soon. And yes, there is a component being added for fog tweaking. Besides the Unity lighting windows, there is an extra couple of properties attached to the scene save settings there. A few of these changes do require processing server updates. We haven't done those in a while because we have a fairly stable build right now. We've been hesitant to touch it, but there will be some updates coming down the line. There's a few other things that are reliant on processing server changes as well. Let's see, what else have we got? New Lua SDKs. You can now access all the audio reactive components in Lua, which means that you can now modify those things on demand through scripting. That's actually been used in our big load tests. It's one of the things that we've been running in the background just to try and make sure that everything runs as close to real as possible. Let's see, fixed bugs with Mac OS, decoding video. That's always been a headache. And what else have we got here before I yield the floor a little bit? No, I think that's probably good. Yes. Sorry?
Check Skype. There was a couple of questions went into Slido.
Oh, okay, right. SkyFX system, the full one. Okay, that's an excellent question. We have actually got a few things there. The SkyFX system, in fact, I have left an elephant in the room, which is our new networking and new region server updates. This is tied to that. So camera stuff Monday. So is there any other questions? I'll just run those through. Otherwise, I'll do it.
That's it at the moment.
All right. So yes, the last one that we need to sort of cover off is the region server stuff. I've been a little bit hesitant, but there's a few things in there that bring our region server a little bit more heavy duty than it used to be. Currently, our region server is fairly lightweight. It does validation of updates from clients, but it doesn't do too much more than that. There's the server-side scripting was the first thing that we actually added that sort of really added any kind of compute load to the region server. The new region server that we are building at the moment that is actually working, so we're almost back up to spec with the primary one. I want to get off the old region server as soon as possible because the old one is tied to, among other things, our system administrator doesn't like it because it runs on Windows only. So our new region server is actually cross-platform, among other things. So we actually are deploying on Linux. We already have. That's been one reason that it's been migrated off. The second reason is that the old region server has been a little bit unreliable. Many of you have noticed what we know is packet loss due to the way that it works using what's called a reliable UDP system. Reliable UDP often isn't, which is a bit of a pain, among other things. So that results in avatars not being where they actually physically are or should be sometimes, and it results in things like vehicle stuttering and the rest of it because sometimes we lose messages and it sort of gets caught up. later on. New region server fixes a lot of these problems. It is one, reliable. We're using a prioritized TCP system instead of UDP. One of the big reasons why you use UDP over TCP is the ability to prioritize and drop messages. So you can say, oh, this is urgent, I'll start delivering this instead of the thing that I already sent. We're using a short batch overlay on top of TCP, and that actually also has some improvements to general quality when we actually begin to scale up the number of avatars. When you put UDP in place, even reliable UDP, as you begin to scale up into the gigabits or packets per second, which is what we see when we've got lots and lots of avatars connected, sort of 500 plus, the operating system begins to sort of drop packets at a rather unhealthy and unwanted rate when using UDP. So we do have some changes there which will improve general reliability. The other changes, though, is that the region server is a lot more active than the existing one. So the region server has a full processing loop. It has an understanding of the scene in a way that the current region server doesn't. This means that a few things like the terrain project that we put at the start of this year are being made dependent on the new region server. We got stuck on a nasty bug with that one with some coordinates referencing that we ended up tracing down to the database layer. But we've got the fixes for that one in the new region server. So I'm looking to push that one out sooner than later. There's a few other bits and pieces. The full sky and weather system is partly dependent on that because we're doing server-side simulation here of those parameters. That's part A, and part B is that there is some shader and stuff that needs to be completed too. So I can't give a firm timeline on when that will come out, but if you guys make enough noise about it, then I assume that we can get that one pushed up the priority list. So my goal with the region server is to get that one out the door really, really quickly. And the reason is I just want to drop the old one. It's a bit annoying having to do work on two stacks simultaneously, especially with the new, particularly in the client code, not so much in the server code, particularly with the new system being that much better than the old one. All right, so I think that unless there's any other questions, I'm going to turn to you, Carsten. Hopefully you're not in a stupor and falling asleep as I'm rambling on here. Have I still got you?
Yep, over here.
Fantastic. So look, what I wanted to talk a little bit about is actually some of the stuff that you're doing here. So we're going to be doing this. You are an inaugural guest this week. We're going to be bringing guests to office hours as well, so we're not just rambling through the same technical notes every week. I know everyone does appreciate those. That we do have a lot of cool bits and pieces coming down the pipeline, but I actually want to run this in a slightly different way. What I would like to do is, instead of me talking strictly about your stuff, because it is cool and I love your cars, and I think I saw I did actually poke at some stuff, and I saw that you guys were actually building a an asteroids game, and that was scripted in Lua as well, which I was quite impressed by. So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that you're working on? And I love the local host region, and then maybe what we can do is we can spin it around a little bit and talk about ways that maybe we can improve things in Sciencebase that would make things easier for creators like you to actually build cool stuff.
Yeah, so localhost was a collaboration between Artemis, Bain, and I, and she kind of had the main vision for it. I don't know do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, sure. So localhost was born out of a Second Life project that I started in 2003 or 2004. And I was one of the developers there. And by the time I had a continent developed, I had a large following, and there were a lot of friends of mine. Like, because I was always working in Second Life, all of the people I knew were developers. And so when you're developing, you don't have a social life. And because I'm living in a virtual world, I needed to get out of my virtual office. Like, everything, I had to be available in world for customers. And I also had to be working on the second screen for other things, developing for work. So with all of my friends being developers, we got this idea together to socially build together in the world that we were developing for, and kind of it went from there. And so I wanted to open up that idea to everyone because it was so collaborative. There were so many great collaborations that came out of that, that when I still have my business in Second Life, but that's my business now, and my home virtual world is SignSpace. So this is where I can get away from customers. This is where I get away from work, you know. And so I'm here now and I don't have to worry about CS, customer service. So the idea here was to change the builder developer social, it's like a private thing because it wasn't open to people, it wasn't open to customers, it was just developers and people that I knew. Here I wanted it to be opened up to anyone who was a member of SignSpace that could come in and just wanted a cool place to hang out with a focus on geekiness or techie nerdiness and all of these things that I love anyways. And when I was new in Second Life last year, I came in looking for, because these were going to be my personal projects and not work. I couldn't bring my work team in from Second Life. We have other projects that we're working on there. And so here I had to start over. And I had been eyeing in the Welcome Center Carsten Stark. I was getting to know people. It was a very small population, so it was really easy over time to get to know everyone. And I knew that Carsten was a coder. So the idea was for me to approach Carsten, and I was trying to figure him out, get to know him, and come up with a way I could lure him into being my coder. And what actually happened was we actually got to know each other as people, and like out of the blue, wouldn't you know it, now we live together and we're getting married in a couple months, and I moved up here, and it kind of a huge upheaval in my life, but in a good way. But now he is my coder, so I guess that works. But anyways, the thing is that I no longer make 3D virtual environment developing my career because I did it for so long and I want to get away from the desk. So I am pivoting to doing this as a hobby, and now SignSpace is my playground when I have time. And because I'm no longer at my desk like 16 hours a day every day, yeah, there's no 9 to 5 in this world, but you guys know that. So because I'm no longer at the desk, I no longer have such a hands-on development direction. And so it's kind of pivoted to where Carsten is now leading the building, and it has developed its completely different idea than the original localhost idea I had. I would eventually like to build my own, like the original plan I had for localhost on my own private sims, but that's, if it's my hobby, it's going to take forever because I'm doing another career where I'm going back to school and this and that. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but this new version of localhost is moving along, and it's got a really nice community behind it, and it's completely diverted from the original localhost idea.
Well, it's still very cool. I mean, I've checked out the region a couple of times, and I really should just park an avatar in there during my work day, because that's exactly what I need. I've sort of had this last few months have just been non-stop work, and my avatar is only ever used for work these days. It's a little bit disappointing. But are you guys opening to community contributing buildings and things to that localhost region?
Yeah, that's the big thing. We'd love to have more community involvement there. Yeah, it's
so we did want to have, I know that the barrier sometimes is because I wanted people to be able to come in for more mundane things instead of the geeky things. Like not everyone's into tech, right? So
yeah,
there's a lot of groups that I belong to in real life through meetup.com. There's like the Star Trek groups that I belong to. Where do you go? Where can you sit and talk about Star Trek? Where can you talk about Stargate? Where can you sit and just listen to really cool coding music, or, do community DJing back and forth on, or where can you, so the whole thing is, how do you get into SignSpace? And so we were talking about doing some tutorials to help people, and not to knock the tutorials that are in the Welcome Center now, but if there's, like, writing tutorials that aim to get like my elderly mother who's 81 in here, it's got to be dead simple. So a very narrow niche audience. How do we get certain people in here to start participating in social things? So we were going to do tutorial area.
Well, that's an interesting point, and this is sort of why I wanted to open a few of these floors up as well, because tutorials are actually a big weak point that we have, and the viewer itself is getting some. Just to let you know that that has been a project that we've been working on already, getting little video tutorials actually embedded in the viewer. So when you do something for the first time, a small little video pops up that shows you exactly sort of how to do it and what that functionality is. So keep an eye out for that one as well. Don't break your back working on this, because it is something we're also working on, because that is definitely an issue, is getting the sort of new user accessibility. It's one of those things that whenever we show ScienceBase to something else, it's like there is a lot of functionality buried under this hood, and it's how do you get sort of just a bit at a time into the hands of every user that doesn't immediately frighten them that there's thousands and thousands of options buried everywhere.
Yeah, so I also, would find myself spending a lot of time in World just kind of hanging out, and so that was also part of my vision with localhost, a collaboration together. That was something I did in other virtual worlds because I started working from home several years ago, and at that point, starting a new business and everything eats up a lot of time. So I didn't really have time to go out and meet people.
Yeah,
so.
no, I understand that. I've been stuck in my office for I don't know how many months in a row now. It's sort of we've all been in lockdown here. I'm getting my groceries delivered. There's very little reason to actually, very little mandatory reason at least to leave. Yeah, no, it's a great idea, and I love what you're doing there. So let me turn it around. What can we do on our side that would make things easier for creators like yourselves? What features, what requirements, what could we do that would make things more interesting? Because I'm open to discussing these. I can tell you why we can or cannot do various things, or if we've got development work already underway.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to. Don't get an echo. Let's see. So as far as just general creation, documentation, I think is the key there.
Yep.
There was a lot of things that I was working on that kind of had to like figure out how things worked first before I could actually build them.
Yeah.
But it is amazing that the components that we have available in the SDK and what's available in the scripting, you can actually do a lot of stuff, like pretty much things that you can't do in any other virtual world. And so it's, I hope to see like a lot of people take advantage of that soon. Like for instance, like aircraft and stuff, like, I'm pretty sure you can do that with the existing modular vehicle component.
I did add components. Yeah, I added actually to the modular vehicle for aircraft specifically. I added some things like lift parameters and things like that, so you can actually create a vehicle that will, in theory, fly. I was actually trying to poke a friend of mine to start building a couple of planes just so I could validate that the components there are correct. I take your point on documentation. We've actually got 2 positions opening up for documentation people, one explicitly for developer documentation and then one for sort of user documentation, how the viewer works, so on and so forth. I actually did already start collecting CVs because I know a lot of the community are well placed to take those jobs because you already know the system and I don't have to explain it to a new employee first. Sort of how it works, and then they can actually write the documentation. So there is a few jobs opening up there with us to actually work on those points, because I take that point exactly. I mean, as a developer, there is so much that are components that exist, but just sort of knowing they exist doesn't really tell you how they work or what the limitations are, or if there's even a bug, whether the bug is actually a bug or not, is certainly something that I think we need to address. the other side is, of course, yes, the scripting API. I mean, I built this, the scripting API with the explicit goal in mind that we would have the most powerful virtual world platform out there. I've always wanted to work towards that end point where we are the virtual world where you can do other things that no one else can. And I'm always keen to work towards that. If we pull off the developer side of things for a second, what about consumers? Is there anything sort of as a user perspective that that I guess tutorials we've already covered, but features and things inside the client that would be useful for people?
Shifting to a single stable viewer definitely is going to be the main thing there. I know a lot of people talk about in-world building, being able to customize their homes, and we have that to an extent with the items from the shop and furniture items and things like that. I think there's the Archmatrix stuff, but I haven't played with that myself.
Yeah, no, the in-world building stuff. I mean, first thing first, I want to get the new terrain system out because that one's just been sitting idle for, I mean, it's almost been 9 months now actually since we got the first prototypes up and running, and it's still not out the door. That was courtesy of a single bug. I had a single developer working on that bug for give or take 4.5 months, trying to figure out where the problem was, which is just an absurd period of time. But we have actually finally cracked that one, so that will be coming out the door sooner than later. Interesting question. Sharing content from Netflix, Amazon, Spotify, and more games. Now, the problem here is this comes down to an IP rights thing. If you are able to share content from Netflix or Amazon or Spotify or whatever, you are distributing copies of copyrighted content, and the owners and developers of that content are not particularly happy about that. So as much as I would love to be able to offer it, it is something that needs explicit deals with the rights holders to do. There is some limited capacity for things like YouTube. We can get away with YouTube because YouTube is free to access. In those particular things, there's nothing stopping us from having the viewer point at the original source. So we can have like 5 viewers all connected to the same YouTube stream. That's okay because every single one of those viewers is connecting to YouTube directly. And in that case, YouTube is sending the content around and has the rights to do so. But things like Netflix is a bit trickier. Obviously, you can't embed the DRM that they use. We've looked into this one a couple of times, is actually how to get around that. Technically, I think Spotify can be done. Spotify has a JavaScript SDK, and I think that someone could actually make a Spotify player using an embedded web browser. And if you could figure out sort of the interop, it is possible to drop interop browser JavaScript with our Lua. There are some functions that go both directions. You could probably make a Spotify player in Sciencebase doing that one. Yeah, in terms of the rest of them, it's quite tricky. Licensing model of share Netflix and API, kind of. I mean, there have been plugins that do this. Netflix deliberately breaks them, and when a operator deliberately breaks something, that's usually a sign, don't do it, and you certainly can't rely on it. So that's a tricky one, but yeah, I mean, in-world build tools, obviously we have been improving those a bit. Have you been using the latest 2B viewers? I think I've got a bit of a latency here. Carsten and Artemis, are you guys still there?
Yep, we're here. Yeah. I've been using 2B57.
Yeah, so one of the things you'll notice inside those 2B viewers is that there is lots more support for things that you don't notice about. For example, in the room editor, you can select multiple items by holding down Control. You can actually do Control and Shift Select and things like that actually work in the items list. You'll notice there's little buttons and things for binning and trashing. There's a lot of very small and subtle improvements we're doing to the build system. One of the bigger ones has been actually getting multi-user building working in the same environments much more robustly. One of the things that we've been doing on our side has been, we hold all of our staff meetings in Sciencebase, and we're doing that for a while now. But we've actually sort of started turning our staff meetings into build parties, because it's interesting getting 6 or 7 different people all building simultaneously in the same space. So if I sort of drop things down in this region, you'll find that actually all the modifications are happening in real time, which wasn't the case when we first launched the room editor. The room editor was sort of packed down to users who, when you hit save, everything appears to everything. But now actually you'll notice that everything gets updated in real time. In the 2B viewers in particular, we've fixed a lot of the bugs and things that crop up when you're doing this. You'll find that most changes will propagate in real time, and there's no real issues if like 4 or 5 people are all editing in the same room floor at the same time. All the changes should synchronize back properly. In terms of actual content creation, something that got cut from the 2B viewers a while ago because we were preparing to release them was the new build editor. Now that was actually in the 2B viewers for a while. I think it was about 2B30 or something that it got cut because we were making the decision to stabilize and release. That will be coming back. And the build editor there has some improvements to both the inventory. It uses larger thumbnails. It has got categories. It's got searching and filtering in real time and all the rest of it, the good stuff that you're used to. But it also has new placement tools. So you can, for instance, select the physics placer, and you can drag your mouse from one end of the screen to the other, and it'll just spawn a pile of content. So if you put, for instance, a brick down, you can drag across the screen, and it'll deploy 1,000 bricks with physics. And then once the physics is stabilized, it'll save that final position that they sort of reached. So there's a few things there, but the other big change we made to that one that's a little bit more under the hood is that we had added support for parametric objects. That's only adding support. We haven't added the parametric objects themselves, but the panel that shows sort of objects allows us to inject new types of content into the region. So we've got two types of parametric objects coming down the pipeline. One is a sort of a CSG primitive system. That means you've got the ability to sort of cut and remove objects using simple Boolean parameters. They're just basic parametric objects, and then there's some other stuff that will be going down that pipeline as well, and that will be sort of taking the work that we did with Archimatics to another level, because I thought Archimatics is quite a cool feature, but unfortunately it's a paid feature for developers, so not a lot of people have taken advantage of it. Shop. Yes, so this is an interesting question. Sorry, I'm derailing this one this week. We can go on for as long as you guys are happy to. Getting the shop easier to find. Yes, this is also in the 2B viewers already. This is a feature that is available. When you go to the shop for the first time, you pull up that featured list. There is a team that are managing what sort of shows up there, and that should be cycling twice a week at least on that. So when you look on the shop featured page, well, actually, I'll get into 2 things here. The other thing is that we've got the ability to create featured pages like that within the results now of the category pages. So when you go to the clothes page, besides just having sort of the category listing, we also have the ability to inject rows of content in there. So we can say this is a bundle of jackets that we like. So when you go into the jackets tab, we've got a feature tab at the top. That is actually already in the viewers. We have actually trained a community member, I'm not a community member, a community staff member, a community team member, there we go, that's the term I use. We've actually trained them on how to inject these things. So once the 2B viewers go live, we anticipate doing those on a regular basis, building up those featured listings. We will also be offering the ability to buy those slots with silver, because we know that many creators, including myself, have mountains and mountains of silver that need to be disposed of. So we'll be letting you rent those positions, so you can just sort of park up an ad inside the shop, and that means that you can feature content that you think is particularly well made and is worthy of advertising to a variety of people. The second thing that I just wanted to touch on, because this comes back to the room editor, is something that we've been discussing. We haven't started any work on this one. We did spec it out about 2 weeks ago. When you build content that reuses materials, let's say you've got a pack of let's say region creation template items. So you've got maybe a sci-fi pack that's got walls and floors and roofs and whatever. Lots of the time you'll be sharing materials there. You'll be using an Atlas texture that sort of has everything embedded on it. Now, the problem with the science-based system right now is that it's designed that one person modifying a piece of content at a time will never update or overwrite someone else's content. That's due to our versioning system. So every asset is completely self-contained. We pack all the textures, all the materials, all the whatever into the material. Now, when we unpack that data on the other end, if the data is the same, we don't load 2 copies of it into memory, but we do certainly ship that content around. So over the network, you get the full data packs and things like that. But one of the things we have been adding or debating adding support for, and I think is good, and this will have to come with the new room editor picker, because I've got to bring that one back, because it's tied to there, is the idea of actually be able to create Atlas objects. So you can have one furniture item that actually contains a dozen furniture items. And when you buy it from the shop, it'll just be one item. It's one item in your inventory, but when you actually use it in the room editor, it'll unpack into the 12 or 25 or whatever different items. And when you do this way, it makes it easy to flip between items that are associated to pack. 2, it makes the store experience easier because you've got the bundle straight up. You don't actually have to sort of go through bundling mechanics. And 3, the performance will be a bit better. So that's something that we're debating. I don't know when we'll get time to do that because we've got a lot of things to finish up first. But the rest of it, that's something that we might put down in the priority list for the next couple of weeks after we get through the current backlog. So I apologize again. I sort of derailed our conversation here. So I'm sorry for that, but I am interested in hearing more from you guys on any sort of. Let's do a final question. What was the one feature that you would like us to look at implementing that would make your lives easier?
Immersibility, a way to make a region more than pretty, not by you offering, but basically offering a way to customize the questing system.
Yep.
Because when I build a region, there's a very, you have the art design and the storyline and all of the scenes and this and that, and you work it together. And although there's a functioning questing system, I would like to be able to customize it to the art direction of whatever region I'm in.
Okay, so I'll ask this of you, and Carsten, if you want to answer your own separate answer for this as well, I'm happy to have that too. So what kind of customizability would you like there? I guess there is built-in assets for things like the exclamation mark above NPCs and things like that. We can certainly expose those to be edited. That's an easy change that I can make in 5 minutes actually. But what other aspects would you like to be able to edit and customize here?
So it would be a change of graphics because I would do specific, like maybe a graphical fade behind the text and a different text font and different locations for where they're going to pop up. Maybe something that fades in and out. So you have to, like hidden object, you click on the screen and then you get the next progression through the quest. Something that can be incorporated with other elements of questing, RPG type ideas. Really, it's a system. I actually bought a system, but I don't want to have to integrate it into Sciencebase. I'd rather work with what's here natively.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. Do you know that the questing system does actually have scripting API hooks all the way through?
So I do, and the thing is that I'm not the coder, Carsten is, but he's overloaded. But I'm really smart, and if you give me really simple examples, like how to do this, and then have a block and it disappears, and just give me the mechanics so I could visually see and explain how it works,
yep.
Then I can probably look at it and work it into my vision.
Okay, so really, in terms of customizability of the art, there's a couple of things that you can and cannot customize. You can customize the quest dialogues; those can be adjusted. It's possible to build what's called a quest canvas, and that replaces the one that's built in using our existing UI. The other side of things, though, is that there's a few bits of UI that can't be customized. I think the NPC invitation and accept stuff when doing quest steps. I think that's built in UI, and that's not customizable. But all the other bits can be. One of the things about the NPCs is that you actually don't need to. NPCs do drive a lot of the quest components. So you sort of have a quest giver NPC, and that's the person who always starts the quest. But it doesn't need to be an actual NPC. It can be an object. And it also doesn't need to be visible in the scene. One of the things you can do with the quest NPCs is bury it at sort of minus 10,000 meters below the ground. So it's completely invisible. But those things do have properties that can be accessed through the clickables and the other activators. So when you click on the activator, it will launch the quest. There is actually options to start those things that way. And that means that you can have, for instance, a UI, for instance, that triggers and stops these things. Scripting also does give you a fair level of access to it. If there is things that you want to replace, please push issue tracker issue up on this one, because it would be an easy one for us to make a few more tweaks of accessibility there. But it also is probably a sign that we need to document a few of these things, because most of that stuff actually can be done already.
Okay. And then the other thing, it's very small, but I don't know how easily it is to implement. But I've always wanted to be able to take control of the loading screen so that we have a seamless story. Like we could put something up that's relative to the quest or whatever experience they're in from region to region.
So to do that, we actually have to have a loading screen that loads the loading screen. It depends a little bit on the size of your prefab there, I guess, the loading screen, and how big the loading is in general. What I could offer you there, I could offer you better handling of large description texts. I can probably offer a few things along those lines, maybe a couple of loading images instead of just one. So we can sort of cycle between them. I can do things like that very easily. I guess the big question is that obviously loading time is variable. Some computers will, and internet connections will load in seconds. Some will load in longer than that. So it's a question of sort of what I can offer that would be good for sort of both sets of users. Bigger description text I can handle. That's an easy one for us to do. I can also do multiple images. If there's other things like that, I think that's an easy one for us to add to the functionality list.
I have a question. I don't know if this is even possible, but is there a way to control the loading, the objects loading in a region by style? And what I mean by that, is there a way to load something, like say there's a tree as an example,
Yep.
and you're loading this tree in the scene, and the way the tree loads is it grows from the ground upwards in a digital fashion where you can create a model that is textured with the polys, and it fades from the polys to a tree, so that you're emphasizing that this is a digital world, and then it's a real tree. Like it's just like a peek, that window into the game.
So the easiest way to do that, I think, would be to have an animation on the object that launches when the object instantiates. So you just have an animation track that's set to play on awake. And if you did that, what you could do is that would get spawned every time the object gets loaded, because that would run immediately after the object was sort of unpacked.
Okay.
In terms of deeper levels of that, I mean, the deepest level of that would be where we sort of load the mesh first and then run sort of an event once the mesh is loaded, and then we can load the materials separately and things like that. That's certainly possible for us to do. It requires a bit of a deeper deconstruction, so we don't load the materials and the mesh and the texture all at once, and instead we split those out. I've given some thought to doing that. It's a bit of a larger job, but it is something I think might be worthwhile considering. It's really a question of what that would do. We would need to give creators the option sort of on how you choose your objects to be split. In fact, we do already have support for progressive loading in some respects anyway. There is an option on the virtual good, and it is actually active and live. So might have to give
Hey,
that some
Carsten,
thought.
did you talk about, I think Carsten had been doing some experiments on localhost where you were using, how were you loading the region? There was an experiment you did on the preview, and you weren't happy with how it was loading, but what were we changing about the loading?
Right. So I used the multi-bundle loading system for the region to see how that would work. It seemed to take longer to load than the single scene.
Yeah, so the it will. There is a few efficiencies you lose in the process of doing that. It sort of declares that up to 10% additional file size is acceptable in exchange for a progressive loading experience. The one to try is actually the streamed scene option. That's something that we worked on a while ago, and I don't know what the status of it is right now. Whether we know to go back, because not a lot of people are using it. So it's sort of one of those things that if people don't use something, it sort of rots on the line a little bit. Yes, there is an option. Yeah, there is an option to do. Oh, sorry, losing my voice today. Yeah,
the single scene stream says currently still under testing, closed to public on the wiki. So that's why I didn't touch that one yet.
Okay, so it does. I think it actually is implemented. Maybe we need to go back and have a look at that one. That might be on my investigation list for next week once I get a little bit of time. I've got a couple of things I need to finish up this week before we get going. Because, yeah, I mean, I always am keen to lower the amount of time spent loading. I think that's the one big thing that we need to cut back down on. One of the other changes I'll add to the new regional server is that we've been working on the mainland regions. That was something that was held up on the terrain system. So one of these things that the terrain system became a dependency on 5 different systems. We couldn't do the mainland without the terrain. We couldn't do there's no point in doing the large environment without the large environment. But one of the things we've changed there as well as, and this is probably not quite so suitable for what you guys are doing, but we do have the ability to actually have partial downloads of the world. So as you walk around, more bits get queued up and downloaded as you go. But your scene's mostly pretty small, so you'd actually be getting that all at once, I think. Yeah. Well, look, I asked Artemis, is there any one particular feature that you'd like us to implement or change as we go forward?
So most of the stuff that I'm interested in and that I tend to focus on, like you'll notice that Carsten is more of the back-end coding and all the techie stuff, and I'm more of the storyline immersion type brainstorming.
Yep.
So for me, what I'm really hoping to see is anything that can bring immersion to a region, because the story is what brings your region alive. For example, I'm a huge gamer. One of the things I love about certain games is the artifacts you could hunt for in Rift, or in the secret world, there's the honeycomb little things that you can find everywhere. Is there a native way that is, without having to code from the bottom up, is there some kind of a native built-in something where you can have collections of stuff with text for story? Okay, that's one of the things on my list.
So that one is come back to the quest system again. Actually, the quest system does have a collectible NPC. Now, again, the word NPC is probably a little bit misleading, because an NPC can be anything. So if you can do the honeycombs from the secret world, that would be a case that you would actually just have all of them as NPCs, and you could do them as a collection quest. Now, the big issue there is that it wants you to do them in order, I think. Although there is a way to do it. The problem is persistence. That's really the thing, is you want it to be, once it's collected, it's gone for good.
Right.
At least until you restart the quest. This one, if you can find Rowan and give him a ping, he actually just changed his avatar name. His avatar name is finally Rowan Freeman. It used to be Rowan Testav 2 until yesterday. We finally bullied him enough that he actually changed his avatar name. So here's the person who knows the most about the quest system, and I'm almost certain that what you want to do is actually already supported there.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
All right. Well, look, I'll probably wrap things up there since we're now 15 minutes over. Next week, so I'll just reiterate this. Next week, we do have an announcement coming up. It is a very cool announcement. It is something that you are going to find very interesting, particularly if you're interested in new users getting into Sciencebase. Hopefully we will have our special guest to announce and launch that one. We are going to do it as a special event. So everyone here, please harass a community member for an invite. I think that there is going to be a cap on the number of people we're allowing into this one. It might be like 30 or 50 people max. So it is going to be a fairly small event. But there is something cool that we'll be announcing at that point. Yeah. So I think I'll wrap things up there. Thank you guys for coming in. I guess the community team, I'm not normally the office house host. I'm coming in as a special guest, but the community team are looking for special guests and things to come in here. We'll bring some people in on our own. But if you are interested in coming up and having a chat with us, I guess let Joshua know, because it's his hours. Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to end things there. And if is it Paul? Paul, you're running the stream. If you want to cut things there, we're all good.
Yep, we'll do. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will all catch you soon.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you guys. I'm going to end things there.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming.